Hello, welcome to the Mystics on a Mission show. I'm your host, Hannah, and I am here today with my next guest, Ginny Muir. She is a writer, women's leader, and guide, and she is deeply devoted to consciousness, love, and truth. The red thread of awakening in her own life has a distinctly divinely feminine flavor. Following its path has taken her from insecure, eating disordered, people-pleasing workaholic to world-traveling, pleasure-seeking, open-hearted mystic. She uses the tools gathered along the way, those that helped her heal her body, reclaim her sensuality, embrace sisterhood, experience belonging, and remember how to hear the voice of her soul, to empower women. She believes that as we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Ginny writes, leads group programs, hosts international retreats, and works one-on-one to create harmony when there is conflict and transmute stuckness into freedom. She listens deeply and loves fully. Through practices both concrete and mysterious, she helps women remove the blocks that keep them from their truest, most soul-fueled expression in this life. With her unique blend of humility and wisdom, she facilitates transformation, bowing to the divine within, willingly traversing the darkness, and turning lovingly towards the light. Hi, Ginny. It's so good to have you.
Hi, sweetness. It's really good to be here.
I am very excited to have Ginny on the show because a question that I get all the time is, what's even a priestess? And how did I even become to be a priestess? And how does it work when you're taking your own life experiences to really use those on your path as an entrepreneur? And so I think Ginny is really an amazing addition to this conversation. I'm really excited to have you here today because of this and to talk all about your background, of how you came to do the work that you're doing today, and just the background of priestesshood and women as healers.
Yeah.
So let's get started talking about your background. How did you get to doing this work?
Well, I really feel that as so many of us have this journey, take this journey, we start with healing ourselves. And that really, to me, is the work of the divine feminine. It's we heal ourselves to heal the world. Heal ourselves to heal the world. So many of us have a story of that moment of breakdown that really led to breakthrough. That was our soul's way of getting our attention and saying, the way that you're doing it right now, babe, isn't working and you have more to offer. And like so many of us, that was, I had struggled to really be in my full expression as a highly sensitive human, a highly sensitive woman in this lifetime. And I took out a lot of my own inability to be with the complexity and depth and intensity of my emotions on my body. And a lot of us will have one place or another where we park our emotional unrest. It's sort of like, I'm going to blame my body. And if there weren't so many things wrong with my body, or if I didn't have such a separated relationship with my body, then everything would be fine. We go to addictions that way. We go to just whatever unconscious checking out behavior we're using. And so if we're lucky, there's a moment when that no longer works and our souls speak louder than that harmful patterning. So for me, it was an eating disorder. And I had really struggled with an eating disorder for more than a decade. And just that was my way of just checking out and checking out and checking out. And I finally it wasn't going to happen, and it wasn't working anymore for me. And my body really wasn't going to let that happen anymore, and started to break down and show all sorts of symptoms that I couldn't really figure out. And that led me to just learn once and for all how to actually nourish my body with food, working with a health coach of my own. And that just was the doorway that opened everything, and reopened all the curiosities and all the connections and all the synchronicities that I'd really been having my whole life long, but sort of brushing aside and not noticing. But being able to come inside, learn how to listen to my body, learn how to feed my body, learn how to tap into my energy in that way. That led me to meditation, which led me to, just all this unraveling of the wild unconscious seeker within me. And so I started as a health coach. And then, as I said, what I really feel I do, what my work is on this planet, is I just heal myself, and then I offer that healing forward to the world. So whatever it is that's most alive for me in my own healing process for myself of coming more and more into wholeness and freedom and liberation, I take whatever I just learned and I bring that forward to whoever it's meant to serve, whoever it's helpful for.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I can so relate to what you were saying about checking out and using a healing disorder to do that, and then needing to even just learn to live, needing to learn about nutrition, about what bodies even need in order to be able to survive. And it seems like that's really the first stepping stone for many people.
For many women, right? Because our bodies are where our souls live, and we so often that's an easy place for us to disassociate because of the cultural programming that exists in the world right now, unfortunately. But as women, we are embodied creatures, and we feel so much through our bodies. And it really is the way that we bring our souls down and through here with our connection to this planet and to all that is the feminine embodied. So yeah, it's a beautiful gateway for us to come back into connection with self, and then through that with source, or whatever our relationship looks like with the divine.
Mm-hmm. And I also feel like the body stuff is one of the easiest ways to disconnect, because it's still so culturally acceptable to diet, and it's so culturally acceptable to talk bad about our bodies, and to, work like crazy, and to, not eat well. Like that can be covered up so easily, as opposed to, say a heroin addiction or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like it's the good girls sort of unconscious behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, there's a whole menu of options, but it's the one that's most socially acceptable still. Yeah, I think you're right in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really disturbing. So you already talked a little bit about the challenges that you had to overcome, meaning the eating disorder, and that nutrition and meditation has really helped you. What else has helped you get back into your body?
Constantly expanding my capacity to be with everything that's here, right? So I really feel like the journey to self-love, which is what we're all after here, it has to start with self-knowledge. And there was a lot that I wasn't really willing to look at. And so the work that I do now, I often refer to it as shadow work, because it is holding a loving space for women in particular to turn towards those parts of themselves that they might not be super excited about looking at. The pain, the wounding, the limiting beliefs, or the patterning that holds us back. And so for me, it's just constantly working to open the door to be willing to look at that, first knowing that it's there, and then moving to acceptance, and then moving to love. So sisterhood has been a hugely helpful vehicle for that for me. Learning to be truly emotionally intimate with other women was not something that I had in my life experience until probably about 7 years ago. I didn't know what it meant to be truly felt by another woman as a friend. I had a lot of very surface level friendships, or friendships that weren't really deeply nourishing me or meeting those needs, and learning what it means to actually be in vulnerable, intimate relating with other women who get you, and who trust you, and who trust your process, and who are willing to see you and be seen by you. That has been deeply healing for me as well, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I can so relate to what you're saying, because we're kind of in the same community, and sisterhood is just something that you can't escape. Like if you want to really become alive, like it doesn't work without sisterhood. At one point, just can't do it by yourself anymore. It's an incredible teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's been beautiful. And then, I work with, I am like I love all modalities of healing. I'm such a dabbler, so I'll give it all a go, right? And I have folded so much of this into my life, right? Yoga is a regular part of my life. Breath work, meditation, the way that I eat is really, I do a lot of intention around that. The supplements that I take, the essential oils that I use, the morning ritual, the rituals that I engage in, the sisterhood that as a support for me. So Yeah, I go to acupuncture. I do all of these things. I dance. I dance is another thing that has really helped to bring me back into my body. So it's just exploring what's really alive and what's really working for me right now, and being open to the breadcrumbs that get strewn in your path. And when something feels like, oh, that's for me right now, I just typically jump in and go for it. So right now, my biggest teacher is Kauai. I'm living on the island of Kauai, and she just called me here. This island has a very feminine energy and an ancient wise energy, and she is my current teacher, like big time, showing me how to stay in my body, showing me how to be here, fully present in every moment without distractions, and just being with this land and this energy is a big teacher for me right now. So I think places on the planet can do that for us as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I can really relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Such different frequencies wherever you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really. And different ways of learning, working, being taught, all of that.
Hmm. So I'm really curious, how do you manage to travel when you're highly sensitive? Like, do you have any tips or tricks around that?
Yeah. Well, the first is I have given up traveling light or trying to travel light. I just don't. I mean, I could show you, like, my suitcase is like half crystals and, like my tapestries and I know that my environment is super important to me. So I tend it, and I bring my stuff. I bring a bag full of supplements. I bring crystals. I bring my tarot cards. I bring Palo Santo. I bring incense. I bring things that I will make me feel comfortable and held and grounded, because I'm not a natural nomad, actually. And so Kauai is really, I've been here for now 7 weeks. And so this is the longest that I've been in one place for 2 years. And it feels, I'll be completely honest, it feels amazing to just be still. And that's why I'm really feeling like, okay, perhaps my nomadic phase is coming to an end. It is totally possible to travel when you're highly sensitive, but it takes some tending. It does take some tending. It takes and knowing that, and really just finding the practices that work for you and committing to them. For me, it's like I'm going to have a giant suitcase. Sometimes I might have to pay more to check it. Like, it's just kind of, but I need my stuff. That's how it works for me. I also am really careful about the places where I choose to stay. So the environments that once I get to my new destination, I used to just try and find the cheapest thing or the easiest thing or sleep on somebody's couch. And now I know better than that. I need to have my own room with a door, because when I'm traveling, I'm also working and I'm meeting with clients. And if I can't control the energy around me, I'm not showing up in my best light, not just for myself, but for those that I serve through my work. So I just am really clear when I travel about what I want to require in a place where I stay. And I'm pretty good at manifesting those places and having them show up. So yeah, I'm like here in this beautiful little cottage where I've been living in Kauai and might be living for longer. We're talking about leasing it for a longer period of time. But I'm just really clear. It's like got to feel beautiful. The bed has to be comfortable. The door has to close. I need to have a place where I can cook food, the things that I do for myself. So I try and keep my habits and things intact, even when I'm traveling environment to environment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this feels so good. I have a pattern of being like, oh, it's just a week. Like, yeah, I can crash on this couch. Or, oh, yeah, it's just like a day at a hotel. I'm not going to pack all of my crystals. But even just setting up temple space and, cleaning the room before you settle down, or, really checking the bed and, being the inconvenient guest who asks for another pillow. And it really does make a big difference.
Yeah. It's just these ways of like, I'm completely in this place in my life where I do not apologize for my self-care, because I know that it's the least selfish thing I can do. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm a pain in the ass when my energy is off. No one wants to be around me. I'm not the most delightful human. And so I just want to show up soft. I want to show up soft. I want to show up loving. I want to show up compassionate. And there are things that I can do to take care of myself to make that more possible, more likely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I would also love to talk a little bit about the priestess path. How did you get on this path?
Kicking and screaming is sort of the initial answer. But the divine feminine. So for those of you who don't know, the divine, there's the divine is consciousness, the divine is truth, the divine is love, right? But on our planet, the divine for the past 3,000 to 4,000 years has really had a very masculine flavor. It's a God, it's a he, it's a him, it's out there, it's other than us. And so from the time when I was little, I just didn't really resonate with that. I remember going to church and I was obsessed with God, but the God that was being taught to me in sort of that traditional church environment just wasn't really, didn't really connect. There was something I knew. I was like, there's all of these layers between me and God, is what these people are telling me. And I have never felt that. I've just felt God in here. And so early on, I became really obsessed with Mary Magdalene. She was like my favorite. When I would go to Sunday school, I would ask all these questions about her, and no one would have very many answers. But what I loved, every painting I saw of her, every image I saw of her, it felt like this. I'm actually just getting chills as I'm speaking and remembering. I could feel her, and I was like, she gets me. That is a relation. That's a divine that I can relate to, the way that she was, what she represented, what she stood for. And so that was like the very first little nudge that just called me into, there's something with you and the divine feminine. And then just little whispers on the path all along my life, most of which I chose to ignore. Right? So we're good when we're little ones at listening to that, those soul messages that come through. But, as we get older, we become more and more with our fingers in our ears. But what really started to come through for me once I opened back up. So after I healed my body and after I was really willing to listen to my soul, the voice from my soul, I just kept getting pushed towards learning more about what is the divine feminine. What is the divine feminine? What does this mean? How do we embody it here on the planet? Where has it been? Where has it been missing? And so my first real experience with this was just more academic. I read everything I could get my hands on. I read Sue Kidd's book, The Dance of the Dissident Daughter. That was my first, and it was about sort of her leaving this patriarchal church environment and moving into a relationship with the divine feminine. And then I read everything I could on Mary Magdalene. And then I read everything I could on the goddess archetypes in other religions, and became just completely fascinated by the beautiful threads of connection with the goddesses. And then I really started to become more enthralled by these words, witch and priestess. Like, these are very charged words, right? There's a lot around them. And so I was hesitant as a kind of, I like to be palatable to people. So my path a lot of my path has been being willing to be a little edgier and step out and say what's true and not just be popular and sacrifice what's really potent and powerful for me in terms of being popular or resonating with everyone. So I was really drawn to learn about, like, what does it mean to be a priestess? And to be a priestess is simply to be a representation of the divine feminine, a teacher of the divine feminine embodied on this earth. And it doesn't mean we don't connect with the divine masculine, but it means that really our way of teaching has this uniquely divinely feminine flavor. And the feminine is all about inclusivity, not exclusivity. The feminine is about soul. God in here, goddess in here, not out there with a very separate experience. It's about connecting to the earth and her medicine, which is everything from food to flowers to essential oils to plants to animals as teachers, really connecting down and into that embodied resonance of what's here on this earth as the divine. And so, that's my definition of priestess. And so it just means seeking that information, seeking that knowledge. And I've just trained with a few different priestesses on the path and learned and soaked up everything that I can about the divine feminine. And along the way realized that word witch, right, is really also, it's the same thing. A witch is just a woman who heals herself to heal the world, who connects with her own feminine nature, with the divine feminine in her, and then brings that forward on the planet. And so a lot of us who have these natural tendencies and innate abilities have some fear around that, because it's very much baked into our cultural programming that a witch is a bad thing or a scary thing. And really, she's just a woman willing to look at the darkness in order to bring forward the light. And that's what the feminine is. The feminine is this, the divine feminine, the feminine in general, is the moon, right? Whereas the sun is very masculine. It rises and sets every day. Same thing every day. The feminine, it cycles. We are different every day of the month, and we traverse the dark and move through the dark moon to get to the full moon, back to the light. And it's that willingness to look at those parts of ourselves which might feel dark, but to embrace the fertile darkness, the habits, the patterns, the wounding, the shadow, the scary places, the pain, the emotion that we don't want to turn towards because we think it might kill us. And realize that if we just let it move through, if we learn to be with it, it won't kill us. And in fact, it brings you ever closer towards the light.
Wow. That's a deep story. It's beautiful to hear everything from the rituals that you use and how you got there. And I especially love how you talk about the word witch, because sometimes I refer to myself just using different words depending on the goddess I'm currently working with and depending on just where I am on my own journey. And sometimes priestess just doesn't describe it, and I'm just not in the priestess stage. I'm just not in that mindset. It's just not what I am in this moment. And then I'll call myself a witch because that's what I am. That's what I am, with like my herbs hanging like all around my apartment, like the drumming, and I'm just, just feeling a little more dirty than usual. And I'm really embracing what has been projected onto this word. And I'm like, if you see me as dirty, if you see me as, maybe someone with a crooked nose who's, eating children, I'm going to rock it. And that's how I feel today. And that's such a vital part of being a priestess as well. And I just love that we have so many different words for it. Sometimes we can call ourselves a shaman, or sometimes we call ourselves a healer, or sometimes we call ourselves wise woman, whatever it is that really resonates in this moment. And I think it's really beautiful to bring back these words, because every single word has all this history behind it and such a different frequency over the years of, having been interpreted by the Catholic Church, having been interpreted by Disney movies, or whatever it is. And even thinking that shaman is like the word for, the male druid or the male priest is also very interesting to play with and to just see how it fits. Because as soon as we give ourselves that label, I feel some kind of healing is already starting.
Yes.
And it's really good.
I'm so with you.
Yeah.
I'm so with you. You can see it, right? You can see it spreading in the cultural consciousness. Like even the more of us who are willing to claim that this is what I am, it's almost like, I was looking around the other day, like at a shop, like and being like, there's all this witchy stuff, and it's like mainstream, all of this, like you said, like the herbs hanging and the potions and the healing from plants and oils, and from really embracing that nature, that part of ourselves. It's becoming much more kind of culturally welcomed, and there is a wildness to it. There is a wildness to it that I think we're bringing back, which I love.
Yeah, and I love that we're also starting to label it, because sometimes I'll go to Urban Outfitters and it's so witchy. Like they have an entire section of, herbs and potions and spells, but the words just aren't there. It's not being described as that. It's just being described as, a trend. And I would just really, really wish for people to also, slap those label on them, to just bring those words back, and to be, to be daring enough to call it like the witch section at Urban Outfitters. And that's just my
because that in of itself is healing the witch wound, right? Because there really is this wound in us that if we claim this, if we are labeled as this, if that gets slapped on, we'll be banished, we'll be exiled, we'll be sent to the forest and to live outside of the village and outside of society. And so it's claiming that title, and then knowing that you can claim that and be that and still live amongst everyone, but there's a lot of like if I'm that, then I have to banish myself before I'm banished. And so just claiming it exactly is in and of itself just begins to heal the wound. And that's what we do. We heal our wounds, and so that we can be all that we are.
Yeah. Another thing that is really interesting to me is how history seems to start with, when Jesus was born. At least that's how I was taught. I didn't know anything about history before that. Maybe a little bit about, the Egyptians, which is also partly because of the Bible. So it's really interesting to me how that I even have to explain things like, okay, so before Jesus was born and before all the big world religions came up, like there was something before that. And that's actually so much more real than what we've been experiencing recently, because that was just like a recent development. The witch wound is so recent still, and this is why it hurts so much. And This is why it takes so much depth and so much deep meditation to remember what it was like before that time, and what it was like when, even the word pan, I see pan everywhere. The other day I was at a Mexican restaurant, and there he was, looking like the devil, but that was pan. And then I had to explain to my girlfriends, like, do you know what this is? And they were getting really curious, and it's just really interesting. And it hits me over and over again how there's just no record of, the witch times, and of, the time when that was really the religion, like that was how we were living. So
where the divine feminine was revered, it was not ostracized. It was not made wrong. People would come to the temples for healing with all sorts of different priestesses and representations of the goddess. And that definitely predated the whole patriarchal dominance hierarchy. God is a he and nothing else is welcome. And there was many rich years of the divine feminine being really revered.
Mm-hmm. Do you maybe have a little bit more information, and maybe can paint a picture, maybe taking an example of, for example, Avalon or some other witchy culture in the past, to really give us a picture of what that looked like?
Well, if you think about it, so really, we are, as we're learning about some of these older societies, and so some of us will have memories of what this felt like. It almost will feel like a remembering. So rather than like go into dates and whatever, I'm just going to invite people to sort of feel into, to see if you can feel a remembering of this in your own system, right? Which doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense to our minds. But if you can even just close your eyes and remember, invite your system to remember. In societies all over the world, various tribal nations, various indigenous cultures, various communities, some large, some small, the feeling of the divine not being relegated to just being a man at a distance, but instead the divine being felt, by priestesses, by witches, by healers and medicine women of all kinds, who would offer their healing forward in various ways, including so medicinal, but also sexual, and all sorts of like really beautiful connection to the body and to the soul and to the earth, and that really healing with love as opposed to healing with punishment or judgment was more the order of the day. And there were temples where women were trained to be healers and guides and teachers of all kinds. And you can just feel that energetic and feel that resonant remembrance. And because it is so powerful, that healing ability was so powerful, it was a threat to the status quo. So when the patriarchy and the masculine came more forward, anything that is a threat to the status quo is very dangerous. And the way that the feminine works is constantly questioning. There's curiosity built into it. The more I know, the less I know. And that's comfortable for us. In the feminine, we're really comfortable with holding that dichotomy of both and. I am both powerful and powerful beyond measure, and I am tiny. And everything I'm saying could actually be bullshit, and I might change my mind 4 hours from now once I learn some new stuff. We're really comfortable with that, but that doesn't that's not very comfortable to a status quo that's based on rules and guidelines and things being strict. And so all of that fluidness, all of that flow was not in service of having this patriarchal dominator society stay status quo, like stay stuck, or stay as it was. So it was all made wrong and evil, and that's where we had things like the witch hunts and the burning of the temples, and women who were priestesses being all of a sudden called whores, even though they were doing some divine healing work through their bodies. And all of that just made dirty and wrong and bad in whatever way it was. So it was kind of like this gradual movement over time, and happened in different places and different societies. But there was a time when all over the world, that was in different pockets in different ways, but totally welcome and totally beautiful.
Something just stood out at me as you were talking, and I wonder about the sexuality piece, because I feel like this
is a big, intense piece, right? It's really up, and it's the edgiest part for people, for sure. So I'm happy to go there.
Please take us there. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, it's so sexuality, feminine sexuality in particular, it's a very tricky place. It's a very tricky place in our current culture, because it is both objectified constantly, and there's this sort of like, slut shaming and all of the things that we're trying to undo, of like, how do we let women be in their sexuality and be in their sensuality? But the feminine is by nature sensual. And so much of what we are and what we have is that connection to our bodies, and the ability to really literally open to others, and to help to connect with others in that way. And so it is this experience of union and of divinity when sexuality is done consciously and with an open heart, a feeling of safety, a creation of actual deep, intimate connection between two souls. I mean, there's a reason that people shout, "Oh my God," when they're having an orgasm, right? It's this like intense experience of divinity, of union, and just a moment of it. But it can be very healing if it's held in a sacred space. And so as women, I think part of what, as women sort of on the edge of consciousness and the waking up of reconnecting to the feminine, that is a big part of what so many of us are doing, is reconnecting to our own sensuality, our own sexuality, and then figuring out how we claim that for ourselves, and then bring it into the world in a way that's healing, and that is reversing what's been, which is the objectification of women, the place where women need to feel unsafe constantly in their sexuality. And there's sort of this, it doesn't work for anyone. It doesn't work for the women, and it doesn't work for the men. This sort of like grabby, needy thing by the masculine, and the feminine feeling constantly afraid. Instead, it's like working to how can we claim our safety, claim our own sensuality and our own sexuality, so that we can then learn to open and offer that to the world in sacred and beautiful healing ways.
Oh, I feel like this is a place where it's so easy still to hold back.
Totally.
And I've noticed that my natural state is really one where I'm constantly simmering. Like it's just constant, just sexual energy is constantly flowing through me because it's creative energy. Like nothing, if I'm really in my feminine, everything is sexual and everything is creative, everything is sensual. And there is no exception. It doesn't matter. I don't have kids, but even just in the Taoist tradition, thinking of giving birth to children, it should be done with the same energy as like conception. And even that being even allowing ourselves to think about that as a sexual experience, or even dance and food and all that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting how it can still be segmented, I'm sexual in, the bedroom, but I'm not sexual at work because that's inappropriate. But really work is contribution and it's creativity. So how can sex not be present there? And how can it be, not that you have to, be like in the conference room doing all kinds of stuff, but even just becoming comfortable with this sexual energy coursing through you. And that's just such a natural part. And, not closing down when you, leave the door, or maybe even just wearing your jade egg during the day, and just becoming more comfortable with letting the sexual energy in and letting it circulate. And it's really interesting how, as I was doing more of that, how much of my energy was expanding and how much more polarizing I became, how many people were really, really, really turned off by me and really scared too. And then that was when I really started to understand more, not just on a logical level, how scary it is for people to see a woman, especially somebody, because I come across as very young, and it's very confusing for people to see me that way and to see me in, normal settings, like at the supermarket. And, like, people feel it when you're open, and people feel it when you're comfortable, and when the sexual energy is, moving through you, and it doesn't matter who you talk to, but you're open and you're fully present and you're not closed down. And it's really, really interesting even to see how uncomfortable it makes other people, and how many men just can't handle me, and how they don't want to. And it scares them so much because there's this fear in men that the feminine could like devour them. And yes, we can. So it's scary.
I love all of that. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's the stories like this that are needed more in the collective, where we get to, because that's my experience of life as well, right? Like I feel like I know how to open. It's open eyes, open throat, open heart, open yoni. It's like the whole deal. Like, you know how to open. And one of the things I think is fascinating, like when I first learned this, I thought, okay, this makes so much sense, but that the cells in your throat are a direct match to the cells in your vagina. And these are the two places where we're exchanging and opening and, giving energy, receiving energy to the world. So if you're really closed down sexually, if you're completely disconnected, numb below the waist, your creative expression, this throat chakra place, this place where you have your voice and you speak, is also constricting, because these two things are linked. There's an energetic link in your body between these two portals. And so what I want to do is I want to live in a world where women are embodied to be in their full creative expression. And that you can't do it without sexuality. You can't say, I want to be in my creative, I want to do my work in the world, but I don't want to have to think about the sex piece. It's just the juice isn't there, because that is our juice. It is our our life force energy, is that erotic edge, that eros pulsing through us, that sexuality that you're talking about, that eros energy. And it can just be sensual. It doesn't have to be directed at any one person. It's for you. It's not for anyone else. And I think that what you're talking about is that, to me, is what we're working to almost like train people. You don't have to be afraid of my sexual energy. It's not for you or about you. It's actually for me. I'm just holding it and moving it through my body, and you're having a reaction to that. And so it's like, it's training them that, like, it's okay, you can be with this without needing to do anything about it, just being, responding. And there's different responses from different people based on what their trigger is and what their wounding is and how they relate to sexuality, how open they are around it or not. But I totally agree. The more I talk about it, the more I feel aware of triggering other people.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah. And it's okay, right? That's another thing for us to learn, right? It's okay. Like, just true compassion is just, as Pema Chodron says, true compassion is just letting other people have their own experience, right? And so whatever their experience is of you and your openness is just their experience. And so not taking that on as our own and then shutting back down because of that, that's a lot of work too.
Yeah, to give infinite space for their process as well.
Because you're talking about, like, so some men just totally, they can't handle it. So then you could go one way with that and say, okay, I must be bad and wrong. This whole experiment that I'm doing with simmering constantly and being open to sexual energy and letting it run through me, it's not really working out so well. So I'm just going to shut it back down again and compartmentalize it and keep it, either turn it off fully or keep it just, isolated. But it's beautiful that you're not doing that. You don't make that wrong, that your experience is wrong. You're just realizing, okay, these people are having a reaction to it and they can't handle it, and that's okay for them right now. And maybe I'm expanding their capacity somewhat just by being here in this space. And I think it's a beautiful practice.
It is. And even just getting a little more practical than that with our priestess rituals, when we think about the alchemical goddess of ecstasy, I am grace, I am union, I am freedom. Can you tell us a little bit more about that in relationship to like even who she is and then maybe how she relates to sexuality?
Yeah, okay, let me think and feel what wants to come through about that. Because she is the all of it, right? Like she's the transmuting force. And so she is like that beautiful, alchemy is transmutation. It's changing. It's taking something and taking everything that is present there with that thing and not needing to add or take away anything, but using that raw material to alchemize it and shift it into something completely different without adding or taking away. And that alchemical goddess exists in many different archetypes all over the world, but she is that transmuting force. She is union. And so union to me is, let's see if I can feel how I want to talk about that. It's a big concept. It's almost hard to get language around because it's oneness with the divine, with the other, while still staying fully embodied and sovereign as everything that you are. And we don't have a whole lot of models for it. So as you have, like, I know that you've worked with different goddess archetypes, and what has been your experience with her, like what you've felt and learned about her? Because I think everyone has, she's sort of like this ultimate goddess archetype, right? Like top of the heap in a lot of ways. And almost a little, she's like everything, right? She's rainbow. She's every color of the rainbow. She's holographic. She's like multidimensional. She's everywhere and all of it all at once. And so I think everyone's experience is a little bit different of that archetype, but I'm curious what yours has been.
Yeah, for me it's really funny because when I first got into the goddess archetypes, I took a test by Kalila, who is one of the priestesses we love. And so she was basically just testing the frequency of the different goddess archetypes in you. And for me, the alchemical goddess came up. And even now, as I'm doing personality tests, I am INTJ of the MBTI test. Like all of the results that I get for personality tests and, all kinds of tests always bring me back to I am everything. I am freedom, I am grace, I am union, I'm everything embodied, all wrapped up into one. And I never really understood it, but I live with a sense of deep serenity and joy. And it's really difficult to explain this to people, how I can live this way and how I feel and how I experience this planet and how really everything is sexual to me and how everything, I just feel this aliveness in my body in every single moment of the day. And yes, sometimes I cry, and yes, sometimes, I pay taxes and all that kind of stuff, but this joy and serenity really never leaves me. And my favorite way to describe it is ecstasy. I live in ecstasy. And when I'm tuned in to the goddess, and because of my priestess rituals that I have in everyday life and just basically the way that I live, I don't have to zone out. Like I am in this frequency 95% of the time now. So I can feel this aliveness. I can feel, the sexual creative energy moving through me. And when I think about the alchemical goddess of ecstasy, I love what you said about union, about it being everything, it being all together. Like there's nothing I can't handle. I have infinite space for anything. Whatever happens, I'm a full-on yes. And just ecstasy, like even this word.
Yeah, so you're doing something like she's like the tantrika, right? So tantra is a beautiful. We in the West know mostly the actual, the specifically sexual part of Tantra, but Tantra is a beautiful practice, like a beautiful spiritual path, and has a lot more facets to it than just the one of sexuality. But Tantra is a yes to the all. That is basically what it is, right? Everything is sacred. all of life it's a yes to all of it. Yes and, yes and, yes and. The light, the dark, the shadow, the shiny, the sexual, the emotional, the whole thing. We're yes to all of it. And anything, like you were talking to earlier beautifully about birth, right? Birth, which we perceive to be so painful, that's just sensation, just the same as orgasm is intense sensation. Contractions and the birth and the pain that comes through that is just sensation. So what if we could transmute pain into the same, with just realizing it's intense sensation, into delight, into ecstasy, into it's just intense, it's intense, right? And so I live the same way. I like to really live at my edge. I call it my erotic edge. And I'm like, if every day I'm not absolutely delighted and absolutely terrified, something's wrong. It's like I like to be constantly at that edge. And that's the alchemical goddess too, right? Just being willing to be pushing that, because that is aliveness.
I love this, and even love that you talk about things that we would consider uncomfortable, like being terrified and just really being at your edge, because that's just such a big part of it, and it's really good. I can't even imagine my life without, I don't like calling it pain, but it's just sensation. It's real depth, and it's really so beautiful. And now circling back to the shadow work, it's so beautiful when we can embrace it and just love it as much, and see the holiness in it as much as we see the holiness in things that might feel a little more pleasant to us.
Completely.
I love
That's it, right? That's alchemizing, and it's the deepest healing work I know of everything that I've done in all of my years of being on this path of personal growth and development. It's, oh yes, this willingness to look at these things that we call pain or we call uncomfortable, and to befriend them, to accept them, to love them, to know that they are not you. They are just energies moving through you, just the same as joy, just the same as happiness. And constantly expanding that capacity to just let them move. And when we do, they move. They don't stay. So you could be crying intense tears of the pain of the planet, and let it move, and then 20 minutes later be in bliss. And it's the moving of it, the transmuting, the alchemizing, the all of it. That is some really powerful stuff.
Gives me chills. Beautiful. So I would love to ask you a couple more questions before we were coming to the end. Perfect. So I'd just love to hear from you. What's a quote you're loving right now?
So one of my favorite quotes is I want to make sure I get it right, because it's actually okay. So it says, everyone else is waiting for eternity, and the shamans are saying, how about tonight? And it reminds me that we're not waiting for eternity. Like, we are living right now, and have that. It's by Alberto Villoldo is the guy who wrote that. And it just, to me, everyone else is waiting for eternity, and the shamans, the wise ones, the mystics, right? All of the ones who can see all of it are saying, how about tonight? You don't have to wait for eternity to be in bliss and ecstasy and joy. So that truly resonates with me.
That's really beautiful. Awesome. What is something you're currently obsessed about?
Oh, that is such a good question. I feel like I was just saying to somebody today, I'm obsessed with this right now. I'm trying to remember what it was. It's ever changing for me. Well, I've been obsessed with learning about Kauai, like this island that I'm living on, because there's so much to learn. And so I've just been devouring information about the history of the Hawaiian people and the sacred spots of this island, and listening for the voice of the island and having her show me some of her secrets. So cultivating that relationship with the land, with the place where I am living, because what I've been really I have been obsessed with trying to find home for me, because I've never really lived in a place that I felt like is my soul home. And one of my teachers once said to me, yes, wherever you go, there you are. But why not, if you can run your business from anywhere, which I can, why not live where it's easy for you to be happy? And that's just like, I was like, oh, yes, why not? And so I've been trying to find that place. And for about 2 years, since moving away from the city where I lived for 13 years, which was definitely not my place, I've been obsessed with like, where am I meant to live, and trying on all these different places. And so Kauai, where I am right now, is what has felt most like home. And so I've become kind of obsessed with learning more about this beautiful place.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Who do you admire, dead or alive?
So many people. I'm like a collector of teachers and such a admirer of the wise ones. So Mary Magdalene has been super present for me my whole life. And the more I learn about her and how she actually was, who she actually was, and what she embodied, and the ahead of her timeness, she will always stand out for me as someone that I deeply, deeply admire. And then the other person that just came to me is the poet Mary Oliver, because she did such a beautiful job of living her heart's truth, which was just to be in nature and notice it with such beauty, and then put it into words. And so her life was relatively simple, but her poems touch us so deeply still today. And to me, it was like just essence what she did. She would just sit and listen, which she was made to do, and then transmute that into this beautiful poetry that then offers the rest of us just these moments of awakening. So I deeply admire her for that.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So we're coming to the end of our conversation. If you want to hear more about Ginny and her work, I'm going to include links to her website in the show notes, so you can definitely go check it out. Make sure to subscribe. And it was really lovely to have you, Ginny. Thank you so much for having been on the show.
Okay, a juicy conversation. Thank you for inviting me and being so in your truth, right? Like in your serenity and in your joy. Even as you do this process, I can really feel you. So this was a really delightful conversation for me, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ginny.
Mm-hmm.